Okay. Hey, um, it's my pleasure today to introduce North Carolina State Treasurer Dale Folwell. He's joined us today. I got a little bio on him. Um, he's a CPA. Hope you'll appreciate that. He was sworn in the State Treasurer of North Carolina in January of 2017. As the keeper of the public purse, Treasurer Folwell is responsible for $100 billion state pension fund that provides retirement benefits for more than 900,000 teachers, law enforcement officers, and other public workers. He also oversees the state health plan, which provides medical and pharmaceutical benefits to more than 720,000 current and retired public employees, and is the largest purchaser of health care in North Carolina. Folwell was first elected to public office as a member of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education. He brought his problem-solving skills to the North Carolina General Assembly in 2004, where he served 4 terms in the House of Representatives, including 1 term as Speaker pro tempore. Treasurer Folwell began his career as a blue-collar worker and became a certified public accountant and investment advisor after earning a bachelor's and master's degree in accounting from UNCG. He's been married for more than 30 years. He and his wife Cynthia have 3 children and live in Winston-Salem. And it is my honor to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Thanks for letting me join you. So great to talk to the Thomasville Rotary Club. And as you've already heard from that introduction, my home is in Winston-Salem and I work in Raleigh every week. And as I'm trying to solve the problems of North Carolina, whether it's I'm talking to somebody within the state or somebody at the federal level, if they don't know where LA is or DC is, then they don't know North Carolina. LA is Lower Archdale, and DC obviously is Davidson County. So I have a strong connection with your community. Growing up, even before I had my driver's license, I hung out at Payne Auto Repair right there behind I guess what was the old high school, off of 109, and bought lots of motorcycles from the Ray's Honda, and had lots of parts worked on at a Sing Sing machine shop. So I don't know if Deb is related to that group of Sing Sings, but I think they're all related somehow. It's my experience. And have my family is from the Greensboro as well as the Allen J area, and I'm related to the Hayworths, so don't hold that against me. I know a lot of Hayworths down at your neck of the woods. So I just want to spend a few moments with you. Number one, to talk to you about the state of the state, where we are financially given the COVID-19. Secondly, I want to spend a moment or two about where my frustrations are. And thirdly, to talk about what's keeping me up at night. A few remarks and thoughts about Rotary and your importance, and then opening up for questions. Now, a couple of times during my presentation, I may get emotional, never political, but very mathematical. And there may be a couple of opportunities where you hear something that you feel so good about that you want to contribute happy bucks back to the Rotary Club. So please stay tuned. As far as the state of the state is concerned, and for a brief moment, I'm going to be talking in terms of billions of dollars. 7 weeks ago, we applied for and received $4 billion of COVID CARE Act money. This is part of the large multi-trillion-dollar piece of legislation that passed Congress. As soon as that money hit the Treasurer's office, and I'm sure that Hope will appreciate this, we put that in interest-bearing accounts immediately. But very soon after that, $471 million of that $4 billion, so over 10%, was designated for 3 counties and 1 city. And as you're aware, we have 100 counties and 540 cities. But Congress made a distinction that communities with populations in excess of 500,000 would get this appropriation. So 471 million went to 3 counties, which are Guilford, Wake, and Mecklenburg, and 1 city, which is Charlotte. The question that excuse me, a question that I often get, Kim, is why didn't Raleigh get any of that money? And the reason is there's not 500,000 people within the city limits of Raleigh because of all the other large incorporated areas of Wake County, like Fuquay, Varina, and Apex, and Cary, and Wake Forest, and towns of that nature. So that leaves $3.5 billion, and that $3.5 billion sat there for a couple of weeks, and the General Assembly, with the governor's approval, passed a piece of legislation that spent $1.5 billion of that. So where do we stand this afternoon? $2 billion still remains of the COVID CARE Act money that has not been spent. I'm going to start stacking these for you. Now there's $2 billion in the current year's budget that has not been appropriated and spent. On top of that, there's $1 billion in the rainy day fund for storms and God-driven events. And then on top of that, there's over $3 billion in the unemployment trust fund. Now, I know there's complete frustration across North Carolina about people not being able to get their unemployment benefits. That falls under the governor at the executive branch, but it should be worth some happy bucks to know that at least the money is there to pay out the benefits. Unlike when I was in charge of that agency in 2013, every time that we paid out benefits at the end of the week, we had to go borrow that money from the federal government. And for those business owners in the audience, you know that that ultimately resulted in SUTA and FUTA surcharges, payroll surcharges on your employment base. So that's where we are as far as the state of the state. I will say that I think that of any state our size, I don't think there's any state our size that is in the financial position that we're in to pull ourselves out of this economic virus and flatten the curve on the economic virus as quickly and strongly as North Carolina can, but it cannot be done in secret. It has to be transparent, driven by data, and we have to have policies across North Carolina that are consistent. People are very frustrated right now about the inconsistency of some of the policies across North Carolina regarding who can open and who can't open, and it's putting a lot of pressure, and it's making people actually lose faith in their government. I want to tell you that I want to applaud the city of Thomasville in addition to the county of Davidson. The statewide average, as far as a city or a county, the statewide average of how much cities and counties have in reserve is about 26%. Davidson County has 46% of their budget in reserves, and the city of Thomasville has 42% of their budget in reserves. Now, that is far in excess of what we see in the 540 cities and 100 counties across North Carolina. So any of you who are on the call today who are connected with the county or the city government, I just want to take an opportunity to tell all of your members that none of you could have predicted COVID-19 and the economic crisis that has come with that. But you knew that it was good management just to reserve for something, and you've done a great job at doing that. In terms of money, the city of Thomasville has over $9 million in reserves, and Davidson County has over $68 million in reserves. And when you look at what's frustrating me right now, what's frustrating me is that as people have been locked up, they can't move. And when you can't move, you can't consume, whether it's going to a Ford dealership or anything else. And when you can't consume, that means you're not generating gas tax, income tax, sales tax, and occupancy tax. And those are the things that ultimately fund things that the Rotary does care about: public education, public safety, public works, and public roads. My second frustration is that when this COVID CARE Act money came down from Washington, none of it was appropriated for the cities, number one. And number two, it had strings attached to it. And as I've talked to Congress men and women from across North Carolina, in addition to the 2 United States senators representing us, I've sort of said to them in a little bit of a snarky way, what in this world is happening that's not COVID-19 related? I was in Charlotte last Thursday, and I had a 7 a.m. meeting at a McDonald's in Concord where I stood up to have the meeting. I then went to the rest area, one exit down, and the way that you go into the rest area has changed. When I arrived in Charlotte, most of the buildings I was not allowed into, and the ones that I was allowed into, they had procedures to go through. everything happening in our world today is COVID-19 related. So to send this money down, to have strings attached to it so that these counties can't use this money to backfill the loss of revenue because people have been locked in place, to me is just absolutely bizarre. And that's what's frustrating me right now, because people are used to a level of service with public education, public safety, public roads, and public works. And these counties and communities need this money to backfill their budget shortfalls. Where my fears are, my fears are especially for rural North Carolina, all rural North Carolina, but especially eastern rural North Carolina. When you leave Raleigh and head east, in order to get to the Outer Banks, for example, you have to go through Terrell County. Columbia is the city within Terrell County. To give you an idea of how dramatically some parts of North Carolina have depopulated, I want you to imagine this. There are almost as many people in Terrell County today than there are students at Myers Park High School in Charlotte. There's almost as many people living in Terrell County today than there are students at Myers Park High School in Charlotte. So that should give you some sense, somewhat emotional, but some mathematical sense of what's happening in rural North Carolina. So there is no cushion. There is no economic development. There is no property tax base that is growing and thriving and increasing. There's none of that to cushion their finances, and their finances are all revolving around public education, public safety, public works, and public roads. So where my fear is today, and I say this because one of the 21 major responsibilities and duties of the state treasurer is to be the chair of the State Banking Commission, which regulates all the state banks and savings and loans across North Carolina. And a lot of those are in rural North Carolina, providing capital to people. The second part of that, and I hope this makes sense to you, is the fact that I chair the State and Local Government Commission. That State and Local Government Commission was formed after the Depression and the bankruptcy of Asheville, North Carolina. And it's with over 1,300 entities. So 100 counties, 540 cities, water and sewer district, airport authorities, colleges, universities, the state itself. When you want to borrow money on a tax-free basis, you have to go through the Local Government Commission. And I'm very concerned about the 20, 25, and 30% declines, especially in rural North Carolina, in sales tax and occupancy tax, and what impact it's having on the financial health of those communities. Just briefly, let me say a little bit about Rotary. I can tell you I get a couple of inputs from Rotary every week. Number one, somewhere between Winston-Salem and our office in Raleigh, when I come down on Mondays and come back on Fridays, somewhere along that route, I'll always see a digital or vinyl billboard of Rotary International and Service Above Self. And I just want to applaud you by saying that I can't imagine where our communities and where our state and where our country could be right now if everybody, all elected leaders, adopted the four-way test and served the motto of service above self. The second reason that I want to mention it to you is that over 20 years ago, our son was killed at the age of 7. And the Greensboro Rotary Club awarded our son posthumously the Paul Harris Fellow. So for all of you Paul Harris Fellows that are in the audience, I want you to know, I know what that means, not only to your club, but also in the grander scheme of Rotary International. The third thing about Rotary that I want to draw your attention to is a movie. And if you like good-looking actors, it's a movie that you'll enjoy. It's called Monuments Men. It's probably about 12 years old. It's a true story about, I'm just concerned when I talk about nice-looking men that you wrote that down. So anyway, George Clooney and many others. It's about a group of middle-aged men who were deputized by the President of the United States to get between the Allied forces who were going this way and the German forces who were retreating. And the reason the president wanted these men to get between these fighting forces is that as the war was winding down, Hitler was trying to destroy all the great works of art. that he had captured in the last 3 years, tens and tens of thousands of manuscripts and paintings and sculptures from all over the world. And the reason that Hitler wanted to do this is that he knew if he destroyed the history of Western civilization, that eventually people would have no bearings. And when you have no bearings, that means you don't know where you are. And when you don't know where you are, people like him can survive. So 3/4 of the way through the movie, one of the monuments men loses his life, and the treasurer, George Clooney, is trying to build up their spirits. And he said, listen, there'll be a day when thousands and tens of thousands of school groups and tourists and art lovers from around the world are going to visit the great museums of the world and witnessing what it is we're preserving. And they're never going to know who did it. And that's not why we're here as monuments men. And that's not why you're there at the Thomasville Rotary Club as monuments men and women. You do things on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis that no one really knows who did it. But that's not why you're there. You're there because of that 4-way test and service above self. So briefly talk about the pension plan. As was talked about in the introduction, nearly 1 out of 10 adult North Carolinians are connected to this pension plan. Every public servant that you can think of in North Carolina at the local or the state level, except for Winston-Salem Police and Charlotte Fire, every local and state employee connected with this pension plan are participants in this pension plan. And it's one of the best funded pension plans, not just in the United States, but in the world. It represents the 26th largest pool of public money in the world. And when you add up everything we do at the Treasurer's Office, what we do is 8 times larger than the state budget, 8 times. So the pension plan, with all the stock market volatility, is holding up very well. For the calendar year from January 1, it's only down 0.5%. Less than 1% is it down. And we're up about 4% for the fiscal year, which will end next week. So I say that, I'm reporting that to you as the state treasurer and the keeper of the public purse, but the credit goes to the conservative way this plan has been managed by the investment management division and previous treasurers before me. And for those of you who are already retired, we remain in the check delivery business, even though we're working remotely. We're getting ready to send out 314,000 checks that represent over $530 million. That is for 1 month's pension obligation to our pensioners. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have on any subject. If anyone asks me if I've ever spent the night in the football stadium at the Ledford High School just so I could ride a new Hodaka that was at Payne's Auto Repair the next morning, I'm going to refuse to answer that.
Thank you so much, Treasurer Folwell. Do we have any questions? You will have to unmute yourself if you have a question.
I'll just make a comment, Sam Barefoot. First of all, Dale, Treasurer, glad you overcame. You're a COVID survivor, so I appreciate that. And you're a hero there. Also, I send my best wishes from Chad and Paige today. They just moved into High Point, as you may know. So Paige worked for you there for a little bit, and they said to give you their best.
Well, thank you. And I just heard that news yesterday that they had come back to the area, and I'm very excited about that. I correctly so, I felt like I worked for Paige a lot of the time because of I'm always surrounding myself with people, integrity, ability, and passion, and she sure has a lot of that. So as far as my COVID-19, I was one of these people that your members may have heard of that are asymptomatic. So what does that mean? I did not lose taste, did not lose smell, never had a fever, never a shortness of breath, never GI issues, and never a headache. But at some point after I got tested, a few days after that, when I went and got a chest x-ray, my lungs were as white as your shirt. Couldn't hardly ever even see the heart or the diaphragm, which are things you're supposed to see when you take an x-ray of a person. I've been racing motorcycles 45 years competitively. And so my doctor asked me if I have an oxygen meter, and I said, doctor, when you're racing for over 2 hours with 600 people at one time, and most of them are 22 years old, you better have something in your truck when you get back as a 61-year-old to make sure you're in good enough shape to drive home. So I did have an oxygen meter, and he said, if your oxygen level starts to fall, you need to report to the emergency room immediately. Don't call me. And so I visited with the doctor on Friday, and Saturday my oxygen level started going to the low 90s, and then Sunday morning I woke up and it was 86, which is a dangerous position to be in. And told my wife that she just needed to take me to the emergency room.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, let me just say that when your loved one drops you off at the emergency room, it's not something nobody's are used to experiencing. She had made this little bag, with toothbrush and stuff. Nothing was allowed. She was not allowed. She basically didn't have contact with me for 5 days while I was in intensive care. And I appreciate the caregivers who held my hand, who prayed with me. And all of them are from Guilford or Davidson County. One of them lived on Gumtree Road. Her name was Brittany. And the other two caregivers were from Greensboro. So I appreciate the focus on that. I'm one of the lucky ones at my age with my blood type. Now we're learning that blood type has a lot to do with this. Who walked out without being ventilated, but it was a real struggle, and it gives me sort of the opportunity to tell you, as the keeper of the public purse and as the state treasurer, that I can appreciate more than almost anyone the focus on the sick. But we cannot punish the healthy in this state as we try to figure out how to flatten this economic curve based on what I'm seeing happening across North Carolina with businesses permanently going under.
Again, thank you, Treasurer Folwell. Do we have any more questions? Chuck?
I have one, Secretary Treasurer. What is the most recent maybe estimate on unemployment in North Carolina? How have we held up as far as our unemployment rate these days or currently?
It's a great question. I'll try to give you a short answer. I'm not in charge of that agency anymore, but our unemployment numbers went over 1 million. I'll try to be very brief about this. The states lost control of their unemployment data during the Nixon administration, when all of this was sort of taken from the states and it all goes up to somewhere in Washington that works on labor statistics. I'm a big proponent, and have been since I was the charge of the unemployment agency, of North Carolina sort of taking control of its own data. Let me give you an example. If you're not able, available, and seeking employment, and you could be as unemployed as the next person, you're not considered unemployed in that data. You have to be able, available, and seeking employment. So my point of saying that to you is that obviously we've got a very serious problem with over 1 million people filing unemployment claims. But getting a real grasp on who really is unemployed, I think, is very important. The reason it's important is that it's my fear that anytime that a country faces a financial crisis like this, it's normally the lower income and the fixed income people that get hurt the worst. And as the keeper of the public purse and the state treasurer, I value those individuals and don't want to see that happen. Secondly, things need to be better coordinated so that if somebody's job is offered to them to come back to work because of a business opening, that needs to be better coordinated with the unemployment benefit, because obviously it's not supposed to happen, but it does. And I'll tell you a short story, and Paige will remember this. When I took over the unemployment agency, not only did we have $2.6 billion in debt, I actually found a person working in our building who was drawing unemployment while he was working for us. That's how messed up the system was. And you have business owners out there who know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'd like to see a tighter, the federal government can do whatever they want to, but I'd like to see more control over really getting real serious answers to your question going forward about where the unemployment is. and what type of economic inequality that this virus is going to create, not just among groups of people, but among regions of North Carolina. You know, Charlotte and Charlotte sound very similar, don't they? They're both North Carolina cities that are on the southern border of our state. But I can tell you, as the state treasurer, Charlotte and Charlotte are on very different boats right now, based on the economic disparity that's going on with the lack of sales tax, the lack of income tax, the lack of fuel tax, and the lack of occupancy taxes. So it's a very serious question, and I hope at some time in the future that North Carolina can get back control of their statistics and data.
Thank you
sir.
so much. Yeah, that's wonderful information, and really appreciate you sharing your time with us today, and appreciate the job that you do in Raleigh and the integrity that you bring to that position.
Well, thank you, Madam President. And now for my big happy bucks moment. In addition to the pension plan, the defined contribution plan, the health, prescription drugs, financial operations division, and the local government commission, we have another division called NC Cash. And NC Cash is not a gimmick. It's where a last paycheck, a rent deposit, or in last year, a lady was the beneficiary of a $600,000 life insurance policy that no one had told her about. So NC Cash, and I only say this during the end of my remarks, Hope, because if I said it at the beginning of my remarks, everybody would be checking their computers. NC Cash has about $750 million in it right now. And we have more records of things than we have citizens. We have 11 million records and 10 million citizens. So when you get off the Zoom, go to nccash.com, punch in your name, your maiden name, your children's name, and your parents' names. And I've never said this to a Rotary Club, and the Rotary speech that I gave 2 days ago, there were 4 people on the Zoom that had money at nccash.com. And there's no charge to look up your name, and there's no charge to get what's owed you. In addition to cash and securities, I gave $8,000, I think, to the hospice of Davidson County last year. We have $1 million that belongs to churches. We have over 100 entries of food banks and habitats. So we have local governments that actually have money at NC Cash. I was giving a speech to Currituck Chamber of Commerce 2.5 weeks ago, and Josh Bass looked up the Currituck Chamber of Commerce while I was sitting there giving a speech in Moyock, North Carolina, and they had money in NC Cash. So I would just ask that if you find something there and if you're able to retrieve it, that you tithe 10% of that to Happy Bucks. But also to tell you that we have some other things. If you're missing any of these things, we have them. We have some baby teeth, some silver teeth, some gold teeth, and some false teeth. Normally makes everybody smile. And you probably should wonder why. For you bankers in the audience, you already know the answer to this. Every time that someone doesn't pay their rent on their lockbox, that lockbox gets drilled out, and the contents of that lockbox gets sent to the treasurer's office to NC Cash. And not to be so silly about the teeth, but if you can imagine what people my age and my parents' age put in their lockboxes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But last year we had a great event. A family had been looking for some World War II medals, and they were sitting at nccash.com. And I was on the Cirrus call the other day with Chocolate Myers, and Chocolate has the distinction of picking me up by the seat of my pants in the late 80s when I worked at the Honda motorcycle place, and he wanted me to change his tire after we closed, and so that's my connection with Chocolate Myers. But I was on Sirius Radio talking about opening Charlotte Motor Speedway back up for a competitor-only event, and Chocolate said, well, I don't have any money at nccash.com, and Chocolate Myers had 2 entries at nccash.com. So I hope you'll go to nccash.com, and I just want to thank all of you for what you do. And if you want more information about what I just talked about, you go to nctreasurer.com.
Okay, thank you again. I know, yes, I see those applause going up. Wonderful program. And Kim, thank you for arranging that.
And thank Joa for arranging it. So
yes. Appreciate you guys, your office reaching out to us.